Believe it or not, the idea of going to the beach for a fun day is a relatively modern invention.
What is it, Dylan?
I made a backdoor, Dad.
Wow.
And usually, it doesn't involve sitting on the beach in 9-degree November weather in the rain. Okay, I should probably go in before my camera breaks. But when you're filming in Toronto, you take what you can get. So let's go somewhere a bit more suited to the subject matter. That's better. I'm on Brighton Beach, and this is where we invented the beach. Or rather, we invented the concept of beach going. Hi, I'm Dylan, and you're watching Not Exactly Normal. When you think of the beach, or going to the beach, the collective idea that comes to mind is usually fairly uniform. You got laying around tanning, playing in the surf, swimming, maybe a little beach volleyball, kids running around screaming, sand castles, maybe an adult man giving himself sand breasts, someone looking for shark teeth, a dude with a metal detector, and taking selfies of your butt, provided you have a TikTokable butt, which I sadly do not. But I was surprised to learn that our collective idea of the beach is relatively new, and for much of recorded history, the beach was thought of in the exact opposite light. It wasn't a place to relax and play, it was a place to fear and to work. With the world then much more uncharted, the ocean was still seen as a massive unknown. The surface of the ocean, that is. We still know frighteningly little about the depths of the ocean.
Oh gosh. Oh, look how cool.
It was seen as a source of disaster and terror. It was where unlucky sailors went to die. This was supported by how people talked about the ocean. The Bible told of a massive flood that wiped out almost all life on Earth. Sailors shared countless stories about encounters with massive, dangerous sea creatures that we knew nothing about.
As a side note, some researchers now believe that the many so-called sightings of sea monsters
were just sailors seeing sperm whale penises. I mean, in their defense, they do look pretty krakeny. Homer's Odyssey is filled with tales of terrifying seaside monsters, like the Scylla, the Charybdis, and Patty and Selma. And some theologians believed that the world before creation was an unholy, terrifying ocean filled with chaos. I mean, that sounds pretty sweet. Where do you live? You know, on the terrifying chaos ocean. In Western cultures in particular, ever since boats became a thing, so did doing crimes at sea. Or at least, you know, just being dangerous with cannons and cutlasses and axes and spears and things. You know, pirates be pirating. People also largely didn't know how to swim, and so a trip to a location in which swimming is one of the things to do would not have been that appealing. Venturing out into the ocean was a big risk. Rogue waves, near freezing water that kills you in minutes if you fall in, lack of food and drinking water, attacks by pirates, mutiny and disease were all common risks at sea. Suffice to say that the ocean was scary, and the beach was where it all converged. It was the landing spot for pirates, conquerors, disease, monsters, and villains. That and the fact that storms regularly wiped out settlements on the coast kept the beach associated with risk. Yet the beach and the ocean were also places of work. Before the 18th century, seaside towns were largely based around fishing. And while a fisherman who lived near the beach most certainly would have enjoyed a trip to the beach when they could, there weren't any amenities around to support what we think of as beachgoing today. This would all change because of one man, and he lived right here. This is Dr. Richard Russell, and he invented what would become modern beach culture. In the 18th century, science and medicine were on the rise. It was an awkward growing period where doctors didn't really understand people's problems or even the solutions they prescribed to help them. Germ theory wasn't a thing yet, and people still believed in miasma theory, an archaic belief that disease comes from bad air. And out of all this came a lot of wild ideas by doctors to help people with their various conditions, to varying degrees of success, but in most cases, failure. Opium was a real catch-all, bloodletting was popular, tobacco enemas were a thing, but Dr. Richard Russell had a different idea on his mind, to cure people of everything from leprosy to gonorrhea to scurvy, ulcers, tumors, menstrual problems, and what he called melancholy madness, which is my new band name, seawater. He believed that a couple quick plunges in the ocean, as well as drinking seawater, could cure you of a variety of ailments. In 1750, Richard Russell published a dissertation on using seawater to cure people's diseases. Then he set up shop here in Lewis, outside Brighton, to aid his patients with their medicine, which again was holding them underwater.
This is the prescription which common sense and medical science recommend.
Being gradually eased into deeper water.
But only the water your doctor prescribes.
The treatment of disease by salt water was called thalassotherapy, and soon it would catch on with doctors all over London. While all of this is super silly, the first scholar to describe what they called melancholy, Robert Burton in 1621, had some good ideas on how to deal with it. He recommended a change in environment, traveling, and spending time in a location with a nice horizon to look out onto. Not a bad idea, Robert. I'm feeling better already. This theory, presented in the Anatomy of Melancholy, was the basis of many doctors in the 18th century recommending the treatment of melancholy and other disorders by going to the beach. But Dr. Russell wasn't just prescribing a trip to the beach, he was prescribing being held underwater, like a Greyjoy. Is that a reference people get in 2025? Oh God, don't poop on me. A lot of seagulls around here. While a quick dip in the ocean clearly can't cure gonorrhea, as promised, these coastal towns were a lot cleaner than London, and just getting outside of the disease-filled city for the summer was sure to make you feel better, even if it didn't cure any specific diseases as promised. Remember that London didn't get a proper unified sewer system until the 19th century, and people were dumping their waste into the River Thames. And so it was very easy to get sick if you lived in the city. A trip to Brighton might not cure your rickets, but it might prevent you from contracting cholera if you're away for the summer. My personal favorite thing that they said seawater could cure was nymphomania, which I guess if you're in the North Atlantic, it probably would. Super horny? Get in the ocean. Now, this being a medical prescription, it was quite specific. Patients weren't just told to go for a swim, remembering that most didn't know how, but rather they needed to be specifically dipped twice in seawater for no longer than a minute and no more than 3 times per week in a dry bathing costume. Sometimes Dr. Russell prescribed being massaged with seaweed upon exiting the beach, as well as a shower with heated seawater. It was also recommended to drink 1 pint of seawater per day.
Upon first taste, one was said to have exclaimed, "This water is as precious as the tears of St. Monica."
So my prescription right here for the treatment of my melancholy madness, it requires 3 shock dips in seawater, twice weekly for no more than 1 minute per dip. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a dipper to dip me into the ocean, so I'm just gonna have to do it myself. I can feel my melancholy madness receding already. Oh, and before I forget, it was prescribed that I have a pint of fresh seawater upon exiting the ocean. So, bottoms up, cheers to Richard Russell. He also prescribed I pour about half of it down my chest. Definitely feels therapeutic because the water's so cold and it just crushes down on you. It's probably just like mild hypothermia, so probably not the most medicinal thing to do, but definitely a good time. Would recommend some ocean shock therapy. So thank you, Richard Russell. Dr. Russell really believed in this, and even on his tombstone is written, "The sea washes away and cleanses every human stain." So I went all the way to the cemetery in Lewis to look for Dr. Richard Russell's grave, but we couldn't find it, and now it's raining, so we're gonna go home. You know what, it may have been there, but the writing is all faded away because it's all from like 1750 and stuff. Some people mentioned that he was buried in his family vault and that there was a plaque for him on the eastern chancel. We couldn't find either, so it's possible that it was inside because the church is closed right now. So if anyone wants to come to the South Mailing Church in Lewis to look for Richard Russell's grave, please let me know in the comments if you find anything. I'd love to see a picture. Due to the lack of infrastructure to reach these coastal towns, only the ultra-wealthy could afford to go, or even afford a visit to a doctor in the first place. One of the closest beaches to London was Brighton, and to get here you needed several horses and a carriage. This was one of the biggest distinctions between the upper and lower classes. horse and carriage. Not only are horses expensive to maintain, but the journey itself was long and dangerous, as the roads were poor and attacks by highwaymen common, so you also had to have security, adding to the cost. The journey took around 2 days, so popping down for a quick Saturday at the beach was never really possible for anyone who didn't already live there, which again, wasn't very many people. But the rich could afford the time and the cost, and soon you could say, I'm off to the beach, without having your family too worried that you're about to die foolishly trying to colonize the Philippines. It's a deep cut.
Coinciding with all these prescriptions was the discovery of oxygen in the 1770s.
And the following very unscientific belief that sea air was better air because it had more oxygen in it, and it was better to have as much oxygen as possible, and so people started going to the seaside to acquire as much oxygen as they could. This is the Royal Pavilion in Brighton. It was built for George IV, then Prince of Wales, after his first visit to Brighton in 1783 when he was just 21, where he fell in love with the beach. Well, the women at the beach at least. George initially came to Brighton for the same reason as everybody else, his health, but he stayed and built the ultimate beachside fantasy in the form of the most opulent house in Brighton that perfectly illustrates the types of people that were visiting the beach at the time. Dr. Russell may have invented beachgoing, but George, with his lavish parties, made it fun and social.
If not a bit horny.
When the first pioneering patients arrived in Brighton, they found little more than a few small houses dug into the ground set far back from the ocean. But with their prescriptions for seawater in hand, this would soon change, and eventually resorts and other amenities were created to cater to the ultra-wealthy. Bathing and mineral spas had been popular in England for some time, and so the idea of bathing for health purposes wasn't entirely out of the blue, helping it latch on and become a popular trend. Trips to the beach would soon be prescribed by doctors all over London, and very quickly, Brighton and other coastal towns would be swarmed by elites looking to cure themselves.
Today, millions of people make regular pilgrimages to bathing beaches, seeking its health-giving bounty.
And no matter how convincingly they may be advertised, do not use them without having checked with your doctor.
Once lodging was secured, other problems began to present themselves. For one, most people, upper-class women in particular, didn't know how to swim. But more importantly, at least to them at the time, was the question of how does one remain decent while being dunked in the ocean? This was more of a problem for women than it was for men, as the men would largely swim in the nude, something that would create a whole host of other problems.
Oh yeah.
But that wasn't an option for women in a very puritanical society, and so something needed to be done. Even swimming in regular clothes wasn't a great option because the clothes would cling to the body when wet upon exiting the ocean in a way that was deemed far too lewd. Compounding this was the fact that women didn't often wear pants under the floor-length bathing costumes of the time, which were essentially just large sacks, and if they got tossed around in the rough Atlantic waves, their bathing costumes could flip up over their heads and expose themselves to the men on the beach, who would often hang out with telescopes hoping to catch a glimpse. And so they invented this. It's a bathing machine. It's essentially an enclosed cart on wheels that you could get into and then be wheeled out into the surf, often pulled by horses. And then you could get in and out of the water with much more privacy. On some bathing machines, they even added large curtains to the door, so you could lower yourself in the water without being spotted by a man on the beach with a spyglass. I'm serious, this was a huge problem back then. There's cartoon drawings of just like 30 dudes on the beach with spyglasses watching women as they bathe. It was super creepy. Not only did we make you cover yourselves from head to toe, but then we sit at the shoreline with a spyglass hoping to catch a glimpse of ye old ankle. Sorry, women. But once you were in the water, you probably couldn't swim, and so you needed a bathing attendant called a dipper to help dip you into the ocean.
This young lady is all wet, or will be in just a minute. I'm dry. That's not ducking, that's dunking.
These burly men would then hold you underwater for the prescribed amount of time. A big part of this supposed cure was shock. They thought that if you feared for your life, your body would go into an overdrive self-preservation mode and help you cure yourself of whatever ailment you had. The physicians at the time that were prescribing these saltwater dunks admitted that they never really had any evidence of their health benefits, but were sure that the benefits would present themselves with time. Which is, you know, putting the horse before the bathing machine, but I guess it was better than tobacco enemas. All of this is very reminiscent of the modern trend of holistic health on social media platforms, where so-called health influencers will promote natural cures like apple cider vinegar and other bullshit to cure things that they absolutely don't cure. While both Dr. Russell and these influencers profit off of pseudoscience, I'll give Russell a bit more of a pass because they didn't really know any better back then. Bathing machines were quite popular, and England exported them to Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, but they never really caught on in France or America. In France, the beach resorts would employ bathing attendants who would help you get in and out of the water from the shore, preserving your decency with a large robe. While in America, the beach resorts left it to the male relatives, or even chance encounters with random men on the beach. It wasn't uncommon at American beaches to be approached by a random man and asked if you wanted to be escorted into the water. So we just spent the entire day to get to the Isle of Wight to go to Osborne House to see Queen Victoria's bathing machine, only to get here and find that it's off display. We took a train from Brighton to Portsmouth. We had like a 2-night stay to come to the Isle of Wight. You take a hovercraft to get here and then a crazy bus through traffic. And then you hike all the way down to the beach, and sadly it's off display. They have to patch it up, I guess. So maybe if you come to the Isle of Wight in the future, you'll get to see Queen Victoria's bathing machine, but I sadly did not. But look, there's a picture. The same pictures that are on Google. Sam got me an ice cream cone, so now I'm feeling a bit better. So I can tell you about Queen Victoria's bathing machine. Her bathing machine was a lot more elaborate than regular bathing machines, and it had very ornate finishes, and it even had a toilet. Why did it have a toilet? Questions I don't want to think about the answer to. Came all the way to Osborne House to see a bathing machine, and all I got was this ice cream. Just clotted cream and honey, which is quite good. Despite the disappointment, would recommend Osborne House. Good time. Yeah. Very beautiful. As more and more elites came to Brighton and other seaside towns like Blackpool and Margate seeking saltwater cures, the infrastructure in these towns would grow to accommodate them. Soon there were fancy hotels, assembly halls, gardens, and promenades to fill the time between their treatments. Summering in Brighton became a thing for elites, and while they still had their prescriptions to go, the rise of the social scene in Brighton and other beach towns became arguably as, if not more important.
As seaside retreats grew in popularity, one area that led to more uncomfortable social situations
was male nudity. More and more men were learning to swim, and largely they wanted to swim in the nude. This was upsetting to the more puritanical visitors to the beach, and so a solution was needed, and it came in different forms in different places. Some beaches had separate areas for men and women, while others had a strict bathing schedule, where men could swim in the nude in the mornings and women clothed in the afternoon, while other beaches used a flag system. A red flag meant, "Be warned, there be dongs here," and a white flag meant, "It's safe to go, the dongs are gone." Since male bathing costumes were only slightly less gargantuan than female bathing costumes at the time and were made of thick, heavy fabric, who can blame them for wanting to swim in the nude? The bathing costumes were basically a death sentence if you wanted to do anything than being held underwater by a muscly man. Upper-class women in particular were not encouraged to partake in many physical activities, and they weren't allowed to show any skin on their bodies at all. And so if your bathing suit had to be the size of a wedding dress, it's no wonder few women were swimming back then. This issue of segregating beaches would continue to grow as more and more different classes of people were able to get to the beach. It started with new technologies that made carriages smaller and thus cheaper, but the real shift was with steam power.
Railroads were made possible by Watt's discovery of steam power. Early trains chugged along at 15 miles an hour. Many people were shocked, said that man was never intended to travel so fast.
The advent of the steam engine meant that steam-powered ships and trains could reach the coast, dramatically lowering the cost of a trip to the beach. All of a sudden, the middle class and even the lower class could visit the beach for as little as a day should they wish. This was the second big boom for beach towns, and entrepreneurs were quick to capitalize on all these new customers, building new hotels, entertainment facilities, and rooming houses to cater to the whole spectrum of budgets. Just a few years earlier, the beach was only really being enjoyed by the few fishermen who happened to live there. But now, with all these new technologies and transportation options, suddenly the beach was open to the masses. But coastal living was also a fairly new concept even to fishermen. Prior to the year 1000 in England, fishermen largely fished inland in freshwater, and it wasn't until the advent of Viking fish drying techniques that ocean fishing and thus coastal living became viable. Soon, the idea of the beach as a purely medical retreat would fade, and entertainment, recreation, and relaxation would enter the main stage. As more people went to the beach and time progressed, so did the types of bathing costumes, but it was a slow progression.
In the days of the Keystone Cops, this suit was the peach on the beach. Today, it's a joke.
For a really long time, if a woman was caught wearing a bathing costume that showed any skin on her body, she could be fined and jailed.
Uh-oh. Here we go again. Paying a fine won't be any hardship for Mel. A ticket doesn't mean a thing to a phony like that.
Even if she wore one of the shorter bathing costumes that were in fashion at the start of the 20th century, she still had to wear stockings underneath or risk being put in jail. Straight to jail.
This stunt wouldn't be so easy to do in an old-fashioned bathing suit. But then, bathing suits didn't used to be what they are today. Or rather, they didn't used to be what they are not today.
But slowly, it became acceptable for women to wear shorter dresses into the water, or dresses with pants underneath, foiling the pervs of the beach with the telescopes, while men's bathing costumes evolved in the other direction. Starting out nude, they were forced to cover up, and it would be many, many years until they were allowed to show their chests again, and many more until nude beaches became a thing. This was largely due to the fact that as the middle class grew, men were expected to be more involved with the raising of children, and no one really wanted to be nude with their child at the beach, and so they covered up. But it also resulted from a clash with resort owners. The resorts owned the bathing machines and you had to pay to rent them. And so if you could swim, they didn't make any money off you being there. And so the resorts fell in with rising Victorian modesty and started to ban male nude swimming, likely in an effort to increase the number of people paying to use the machines. While England was at the forefront of beach development, the concept would soon spread across the Channel to France, and then Germany, the Netherlands, and across the ocean to America. By the 1820s, beach culture had spread far and wide.
Coney Island, the world's greatest fun frolic, with its beach miles long, all peppered with people. The place where merriment is king.
Surprisingly, Italy was one of the last European countries to join the beach craze, despite the fact that the Romans had a very early version of the beach resort in the town of Bay, which fell along with the Roman Empire. The reason that England was ground zero for beach culture, despite having one of the less appealing climates for beach going in Europe, okay, it's raining quite a bit, so let's go, was the fact that as an island nation, they were more protected from war, and thus their economy was more stable and grew faster than other countries in Europe. England had a large class of elites looking for something to do, and the beach fit the bill. Everywhere resorts opened, like in England, they started out as something only the ultra-wealthy could afford, before new technologies and other social advancements allowed them to spread to the lower classes.
Some take it easy on the $4 million boardwalk, while others snap pictures for proof back home that they really were part of this fun-seeking throng.
Coinciding with all this beach development was the Industrial Revolution. Not only did this make cities more polluted and thus the idea of a retreat to the seaside more appealing, but it also resulted in the creation of the middle class, and soon public holidays would follow, allowing for families to take a trip to the beach for the weekend. Beaches became popular for all, and it happened quite quickly. In Margate, for example, in 1830, there was just 109,000 visitors over the summer, but in 40 years, that number would grow to over 700,000 summer visitors. This new influx of non-elites was not appreciated by the wealthy, who until quite recently had had the beach all to themselves. This resulted in further segregation at the beach, with areas set aside for the poor and the rich. But the overwhelming number of non-rich visitors would force beach culture to evolve. And soon the more structured socialization and entertainment favored by the elites would fade and give way to more modern entertainment innovations, like mechanical rides on the piers, music halls, and other more lay forms of fun.
Now for the good old merry-go-round, carousel, flying horses. Whatever we call them, they afford a merry whirl for youngsters from 6 to 60. Everybody ride on any and every kind of gadget that means motion, speed, thrills, and laughs.
And soon, another transportation innovation would allow for the colonization of even more beaches: the car.
Remember when this was the best way you could go places? It did the job. Everybody liked it. Now the old gray mare just ain't what she used to be.
As cars became popular at the start of the 20th century, suddenly you didn't need to cram into a train going to Brighton Beach, and instead you could go to whatever beach you wanted. and soon what were quite recently just fishing villages became overburdened with beach-seeking, car-driving tourists.
This might easily be termed the toughest driving test known. Oop! Anyway,
resorts essentially paused in development during both world wars. A lot of beaches were entirely off limits anyways.
Many places in Europe, and even as far as Southern California, had barbed wire put up along their beaches. Not that that seemed to deter all the bathers, of course.
When the war ended, people flocked back to the beach, but soon the resorts would face yet another challenge: the jet. Would have been cool if one flew by. Maybe I can CG one in.
Go, go, go. Take a National Airlines Miami Go-Go vacation. It's Miami at a go-go price.
As jets became popular and prices lowered, suddenly the middle and even lower classes could join the upper classes who had been jet-setting for some time and travel to beaches around the world. And suddenly, a beach getaway to Thailand, the Caribbean, Hawaii, or here to this geothermal beach in Iceland was possible for many people in the developed world. This beach is really interesting because it's actually an artificial beach where they ship in sand from warmer countries to give it that sort of golden sand Caribbean feel, but it's a geothermal beach, so there's hot tubs built into the beach right next to the water. It's pretty awesome, albeit a bit cold today. And yes, I did fly all the way to Iceland for this one shot. I didn't, but it's funnier that way. I do have a couple Iceland-related videos coming up, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss them. As warmer beaches beckoned tourists to the south, beach towns that were once the place to be had to redefine themselves, or risk fading into obscurity. Many beachfronts became places where people wanted to live, not just visit.
And this clash between the private and public use of the beach means that beach access isn't always a given.
In most places, beaches are public, but accessing the beach is a constant challenge, as beachfront property is often bought up by the wealthy who want to keep the lower classes off what they consider their beach.
You may think Florida's beaches belong to everyone, but a new law could shift the balance between public access and private property rights.
The battle over beach access,
where access has been cut off by a billionaire who bought the property around it.
Where a community was charging $100 for access to the water.
Homeowners who are keeping the public away from the water may now be punished.
The biggest problem is this fence that blocks the public path to get to the beach.
Levine wants to build an 8-foot-high chain-link fence around this stretch of beach he owns on the Chesapeake Bay. Local residents oppose it, and they filled Virginia Beach council chambers to show their opposition.
This is a conflict that goes back to the early days of beach colonization in Brighton, and it's one that will continue as long as the beaches remain, which might not be that much longer. Beaches aren't eternal. They shift and move over time, battered by the ocean. But with beachfront property being of the most valuable in the world, and an estimate of over 44% of the world's population living within 150 kilometers of the beach, we have a vested interest in the beaches staying where they are. Most beaches that attract tourists need to be replenished with new sand every few years.
In Florida alone, their beaches have been replenished with sand over 700 times since 1944, at a cost of over $4.6 billion adjusted for inflation. This sand is dredged from the ocean floor, as well as mined from beaches in less populated and usually poorer areas, and then it's shipped around the world.
And this has a profoundly negative impact on the wildlife, like on sea turtles who lay their eggs in the sand, or on piping plovers who have been pushed to near regional extinction due to the destruction of natural shorelines. Beach sand is also needed for construction. Since desert sand is too smooth, it's the jagged sand found in waterways that we use to make concrete, and as a result, we're in a sand shortage. There's even a black market for sand now, and people will steal it from beaches and sell it illegally to fuel our booming construction industry. As sea levels rise, beaches will naturally have to move inland, threatening over 200 years of human beach development. The future of the beach is in question, and we need to find ways to maintain the beach and coastal habitats sustainably, otherwise the things we love about them won't be here much longer. Some of my favorite memories are of going to the beach. Every year my family would drive down to Myrtle Beach, and somehow my parents managed to trick us as children into thinking that looking for shark teeth on the beach was more fun than going to the pool. I don't know how they did it, but hats off to you, Mom and Dad.
Pardon?
Dad, can we go look for shark teeth?
Yep.
Here's our family collection. It's pretty great. My dad would do this thing where he would find like a big shark tooth and then put it in the sand next to his toe, and then he'd just sort of like stand there with his toe pointing to it and like very non-subtly do this. And then I would find like a huge shark tooth and think, oh my God, Dad, how did you not see that? It's right where your toe was pointing. Pretty great. I miss that guy. My grandmother spent a lot of her life in Brighton, and her family actually ran one of the many rooming houses that would house middle and lower class tourists when they came to the beach. It's one of these behind me. Sadly, I never got to visit here with her before she passed away earlier this year at almost 97. But here's my mom and my sister out by the pier in 1988. Not that much has changed. Wow. Theme park looks new. I'm really fortunate that my parents took me to the beach as often as they did and passed on a love of the beach that I share with millions of other people. Going to the beach is a profoundly excellent human experience. Hot sand, or in this case pebbles, cool water, surrounded by your loved ones, having a blast, a great day at the beach. It may have been invented by a rich dude looking to profit off of pseudoscience, but it's grown into something we can all love and enjoy. And I hope it will remain to be enjoyed by many generations to come. So what should I talk about next? Please let me know in the comments, and if you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing for new episodes of Not Exactly Normal around once a month. If you'd like to get into even more detail about the fascinating history of beachgoing, I highly recommend that you check out The Lure of the Beach by Robert Ritchie and The Lure of the Sea by Alan Corbin. Both were very helpful in the researching this episode. I do have a Patreon you can check out, and if you want to help me make these bigger episodes where I go to Brighton and learn all about beachgoing history, please do check it out. Your support on Patreon means I can continue working on this channel full time. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Now off into the water. Good. Oh, my feetsies. Oh, my feet. Oh, God. Definitely, if you come here, bring sandals.